buying duplicate issues rather than irresponsible marketing.
Thank you. No trouble. Carol, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Lubbedarcy. I live in the West Flat. And my question is about an issue that has been gaining momentum really since the previous PC government signed the 2014 Forest Strategy Management Deal. And then the next government, the Liberal government, did nothing until this review that appeared a couple of weeks ago. My point is about part of this strategy, which involves herbicide spraying on public land, which is the public forest, the ground forest land, and NV Power. I just want to mention a few things so that people in the audience who may not be aware, that they realize that this issue is really quite large for New Brunswickers. 35,000 people signed a written petition that was tabled at the legislature, which resulted in no action, by the previous government. And through freedom of information requests, the amount of money that taxpayers are actually subsidizing this practice with, last year it was 2.8 million, and it's increasing every year. So taxpayers are paying for a practice that doesn't give any benefit to the taxpayers. And I just wanted to remind everybody in the room that forestry is the largest resource industry in New Brunswick, and it's a money loser. And thanks to the lack of transparency, it's very difficult to actually get an exact number, but guesses have been made that it's around $100 million lost a year. So my question is just specifically about the herbicide spraying. Are you going to stop using taxpayers' money right away on this practice? And the other question is, if elected, do you pledge to either introduce during the first sitting of the next legislature a motion to ban herbicide spraying on Crown land in perpetuity, or alternatively, do you pledge to fully support such a motion and actively vote against any amendments weakening it? Thank you.
Who's going to run first?
Thank you for your question, Carolyn, and I appreciate it's actually something that comes up at the door quite a bit. People are concerned about herbicides, they're scared and unsure about the impact of herbicides on their food, on their environment, on our water and our watersheds, and it's confusing, even as for someone who has a chemistry degree and who studied a lot of science, to have a whole plethora of different reports out there that have a variety of different findings. And when we turn to the people that we're meant to trust, our public health officials, we get responses that maybe aren't reassuring. So certainly in New Brunswick we've done this. I'm sure you're aware that the Public Health Office has looked into the impacts of glyphosate and has given us an answer on that. And then Health Canada also undertook their own assessment of glyphosate and whether it's risky. And those answers leave us still feeling scared, because they're telling us it's okay in prescribed uses, but we don't know the impacts that we have from the studies that we haven't seen. So it can be difficult from someone who wants to trust our public health officials and Health Canada and trust that they have it in their best interest.
You're addressing health issues. I was asking about the effects on forestry. It's not just a health issue. There's more to this.
Absolutely.
So please don't just use that as an excuse.
Certainly. So my concern is that there's unknown impacts of this using herbicides in a variety of different ways. And so your question was specifically around a pledge to introduce a motion. I would love to know more. And you and I have talked about sitting down to talk about this, to understand why we use it in our commercial agriculture, why we're using it in our commercial forestry, and how it can be replaced with things.
Carolyn, is your question being answered?
No, because I'm not talking about agriculture.
Can you stand to the mic, please?
I'm simply asking a question about forestry, and I don't want to address agriculture. And I don't think it's fair to the people that have signed this petition to keep harping about Health Canada. This has effects on our forestry, on our biodiversity, our wildlife. People are losing a way of life. And please, don't be so insulting to people that have signed this petition. Using this Health Canada excuse is just not okay. And the province of New Brunswick will have every right to stop this practice if the people here don't want it.
Thank you.
So I appreciate you're looking for a ban on spraying glyphosate on our forestry, crownland forest operations, and that's something that we need further information on to determine what the alternatives are. But I agree that I am unsure about the impacts of this in our system, period, in our ecosystem and for our habitat, and I would love to know more so that we can replace it in our crownland management systems.
Thank you. All right, Bonnie.
Okay, the people's, well, first of all, I want to address 35,000 New Brunswickers have signed a petition. This isn't the first petition that I've heard of with thousands of names on it. There's been no response and no action from the government. And it's time that the government started listening to the people. I just want to mention that the People's Alliance platform includes banning all spraying on crown land and forests. And yes, we would introduce a motion to ban that.
Scott.
Yes, Carolyn, thank you for that question. It's a shame that we're still talking about this. This should have been dealt with a year ago when those petitions were submitted. 35,607 signatures, I think that's a record for petitions here in New Brunswick. And certainly we wanted to address it right there and then. And actually my colleague, Ross Wetmore, put a motion for us to get to the bottom of this immediately.
Carolyn, is your question being answered?
Well, no, because this motion by Ross Wetmore was to put a 9-month halt to spraying while a committee was put together, and who knows who was going to be on that committee. So that's a pretty weak offer, actually.
Well, right, sure, if you're looking for us to just eliminate it, yes, I can see your frustration. But the fact is, that was well over 12 months ago. That 9 months would have came and gone, and we could either have be talking about the resolution of that, but we can't. We can't talk about anything because nothing happened. And no, I know we don't want to depend on Health Canada. I don't know if we can trust them on this issue, to be honest. So we need our own answers, full stop. We need the facts. We need to know what do we replace it with. We're not going to send shepherds up through the power lines grazing sheep. So we need to have a sensible alternative on the table as well. But the fact is, we wanted to address this. We wanted to get to the bottom of this. And yes, 9 months, it's a long time, but it would have got us some answers. Could have got us a committee that would have actually provided us with real facts and results. But we never got to that because the government voted against it. And Mr. Kuhn here left the legislature before the vote happened, so he didn't even take part in it. So perhaps he can talk about that when he gets
Can you
his
stick
turn.
to what you're doing, please?
Thank you.
Carolyn, I can tell you the NDP in our platform, we're committing to ban glyphosate spraying on crown lands. And I can tell you, and I do understand your issue, it's not just about the potential health effects. You make a fabulous point. We're spending $2.8 million on this spraying. I would feel a lot more comfortable if we were spending that money, most likely less of that money, on paying people to clear the brush, to pay people to do honest work in the woods, as opposed to possibly, decimating our woodland animals. Bambi. But specifically, but in seriousness, we've been destroying our beautiful deciduous forest for years, monocropping our own lands, the lands that belong to our children as their natural heritage. And you know what? And I would like David to discuss Ross Wetmore. This is an area where there's lots of misinformation flying about, and the worst thing you can do as an elected official is to not go to a vote. You should either go to it or vote against it, and be clear with the public about why you voted the way you did. You can give nuance, you can talk about your concerns that you had, but when you don't go to a vote, you leave a vacuum, and people fill that vacuum with all the misinformation possible.
Are you committed your party is committed? Is that what you're saying? Carolyn, are you getting an answer?
Right out of the gate.
I'm getting an answer.
answer, but I think everybody needs to know that that Wetmore motion was weakened by the Liberal Minister of Environment into just asking for an update to the report that had been given by the Chief Medical Officer. So the motion was very weak already anyway. So the Liberal government killed that motion.
Okay, David.
Thank you very much. Yes, a Green government would, in fact, refuse to sign any further permits that would enable the spraying of glyphosate over our forests or under our power lines. That's how it works. The only reason that spraying is permitted is because the Minister of Environment signs permits every year approving the spraying of glyphosate over our forests and under our power lines. In a Green government, our Minister of Environment would not sign those permits, and so the companies would stop applying for them. So that would be the end of glyphosate spraying over our forests and under our power lines. We can't just do that though. We've got to change our forestry practices and get away from what's even more expensive than a couple of $1 million we give the companies to spray hazardous chemical over our forests. We've got to stop spending all this money on converting our natural forest into plantations. It's costing us a lot of money, and it's altering both the ecological nature of the forest and the economic opportunities of our forest by creating a very simplified forest system that means we can only produce very simple few kinds of forest products. So we need to do that, and that means ripping up the contract that was signed with JDI and the other big companies that gave away all that extra wood and resulted in the deregulation of forest management in our province. If we don't form the government, I will bring a motion forward again. I drafted a motion to have the same impact on glyphosate as I just described. I drafted that motion. The Tories have been seconding all of my motions up until then. I submitted it to my Tory colleagues, and they said, we're not going to second that motion. Instead, they came up with their own fake motion that sort of gave the sense that maybe they would get rid of glyphosate spraying. It didn't happen. I participated in that debate fully, using my time to clearly make my point that that was the case. And so I did participate in that debate. Now, I learned a lesson. I had actually an eye appointment. You can laugh, but you know, in Manila, your time is really full, and I canceled it once before, and the debate went on longer than I expected, and so I went and got my, prescription. And so maybe that was a political mistake, but that's what I did.
Thank you, David. Susan.